Hello everybody, this is Beth, back again with another art review video, and this time, this review was done as per request, not for the book specifically, but for this specific author, Andrew Loomis. He was originally a magazine illustrator, and he did make and write about, I want to say maybe 5 or 6 books. There may be more, but I know I have at least 5 or 6. But anyway, this is just one of his books. This one was made mostly with beginners and like art hobbyists in mind. But what I really liked about how he wrote his book was that he has a very straightforward to the point way of, I guess, writing, but he has a humorous take on things. So it's just not like do this, do that. It's you do this, but he'll add like a little something funny in there just to make it kind of more enjoyable. I honestly, cartoonish, like very cartoony Western styles are not my personal style, but I really enjoyed reading this book just because of the way that he wrote it, and also how it was very also educational. Like I said, the contents of it, the characters are more cartoonish in nature, but what I also really liked about it was that a lot of the rules and stuff that he applies to it can still be qualified to create more realistic styles and more real life, build on more real life characters. And that's what I really enjoyed about it. So we'll go ahead and start. Like I said, this is just one of the many books that he's done, but it's called Fun with a Pencil, how everybody can easily learn to draw. Like I said, made mostly for past-timers or people who are just starting. And this book, as you can tell, honestly, it is one of the smallest that he has, because all the rest of his books are a lot bigger. And this one, I think, has about 120 some odd pages. And I will say that these books, because they are considered classics, they do tend to run higher on the price range. This one in itself was $39.95. I mean, it goes up depending on where you're from and whatnot, but like I said, these, not the cheapest, but I will say they are definitely worth the money. Now, because this book is a little bit smaller, there are no specific chapters. So I had to kind of break it up in parts. Now it is broken up into like part 1, part 2, and part 3, but there's a lot in part 1, so I had to break it down a little bit. But anyway, as I said, it's very simple and straightforward. But how he starts it is like, first he starts with like a simple form and shape, and then it progresses to like basic outlines and learning to draw shapes and perspective, which I thought, which is good for anybody who's learning how to draw, to start out. But what I really liked about it is how he's, most people are like, start with a circle, start with this, start with that. He's not like that. How he starts it is like, just draw any kind of shape. He says it can be lopsided and it will still work. So what I really liked was that his willingness to be able to work with what he had, or what, basically that's what he's trying to teach you. Work with what you've got. Even if it's not that great, you will get there eventually if you practice it. Like I said, you starting to learn how to build it from simple shapes. Like he shows a little bit of examples right there, even some funky looking ones. And then it goes into learning how to draw the head in perspective, but also learning how to add variety by changing the shapes of that you're working with, which I found, you know, really neat, because that can be like some of the issues which a lot of artists that I find when you study their work over time is that their characters tend to look the same. Like the facial features, everything starts to look the same after a while. But what I really liked is that he starts off like right off the bat. No, learn to draw with different shapes so that your characters will not all look exactly the same. And here he adds like how to build up a face. Like I said, mostly cartoonish, but hey, you got to start somewhere. So it's like different shapes and then perspective on the face and learning how to draw that properly. He also goes into learning how to draw expressions and characteristics that make up each expression. And he even emphasizes, you know, practicing on yourself. Look in a mirror and see what changes when you make each expression. And again, as I mentioned before, I learned, you know, practice mixing and matching, adding different shapes to be able to build different looking characters. And also, he also brings out about learning projection and learning how to apply it. And learning how to also add variety but by distortion. And then he also talks about, which I found to be a little bit different, is the divided ball and plane method. Now this is a method that he did specifically himself with his drawings. When you look at it, it looks kind of like what you would find in most how to draw figures books, but it goes into a lot more details. Like there's a lot more figures and math involved as to how the face and measurements go to apply it more correctly, which I thought was really intriguing because most books don't really go that in depth. Now we talk more about how the different method can apply to different face types. And he also talks about something called the method, and also how it can help you with accuracy and applying it to your characters. And then he even has like different compositions and different little sketches of like older people, women, children. He has it all in here for practice. Specifically, you know, for people to practice. And that's what I really liked, was that how much he actually put work into this to make it as easy as possible. And then part 2 is putting the head on the body. And this goes into learning to start the basics of a figure drawing, and also practicing the movement of the figure and learning how to balance that figure out so that it doesn't look lopsided or doesn't look odd. And he also goes into using reference poses, whether it be with mannequins, photos, whatever the case may be. He emphasizes start learning from real life, because that is ultimately what's going to help you learn how to build your characters properly. And he even goes into clothing and how folds, like particularly with clothing folds, which can be very difficult to draw properly if you don't really understand how clothes react to figures and to the body in general. So I really liked how he added a little bit on that. And then he also goes into a little practice of hands and feet, and also like different kinds of shoes. He doesn't really go in depth on it, but like I said, this book was made mostly for beginners, so adding a whole bunch of detail would make it kind of complicated. And then he also goes into learning how foreshortening and how to apply it. There's some more illustrations. Because foreshortening, especially on the figure, can be ultimately the difference in making whatever it is, the kind of emotion or connection you're trying to make to whoever's looking at your work. And then part 3, this one is more on creating a place for your figures. This one gets to be a little bit more on the complicated. This one is where perspective really starts coming into place. But just like his methods and how he does it, it's like so detailed, but yet so simple. I mean, it looks worse than what you think it is, but when you really get down into it and you understand, like, he really breaks it down for you. That's what I really appreciated about this. But you learn how to draw characters on what they call the ground plane, and he also gives you right and wrong ways of doing that and why they're wrong and right ways. But then he also goes into like housing, like learning how to put together a room scene and do what he also calls the ground plan, how to project furniture in a ground plan, or learn how to create an interior. And also learning how to put your figures in that and make it look the way it's supposed to. Again, he also emphasizes use references when you need it, but he also adds don't just copy, build what you know and learn how to draw from real life. So he does emphasize, you know, working with your skill and building up what you know. And then he also goes into shadows, like perspective with light and shadow, which I found really interesting too, because that's something that can also be a little bit of a hard thing to figure out sometimes, especially if you're not quite sure how light and shadow interact with different things. But he brings out like how to work with light and shadow from the sun or artificial sources like candlelight or flashlights. So despite how simple this book was written, it was very well done. Like, I think even though it was for beginners, that even, you know, people like me who've have a little bit of experience, you know, in the art field and know, you know, a majority of this stuff already, it's a good refresher course for sure. And I definitely recommend this book for anybody. In the back, it talks about some of the books that he has out. I do have all of these. I think there's a couple more that came out recently, but I'm not for sure. I'd have to look into it. But the next few videos will be specifically about the rest of his books. Because now, since I've gotten into this one, and this one is just the basic, I'm really curious to see what the rest of them have. Because I do know that each book is made for specific people, like beginners or people who know a little bit already but want to learn more or advance. And that he even has a book on helping people know how to sell their work. So I definitely would recommend his books to anybody. Like I said, a bit higher on the price range, but I mean, just from reading this, like I said before, I thought it was well worth it. And I will leave a link in the video description of where you can buy the book. So, I mean, if you do get a chance and be able to purchase it, I would definitely highly recommend it. But anyway, that is it for this video. I do hope you enjoyed. And if you do have a personal request that you would like to make of a specific author or a specific book or anything like that, please just let me know and I will be happy to do that. Preferably if you could link me or whatever, that'd be great, because then it kind of saves the guesswork. If you also want me to do a review video on any kind of particular art supply, I have not started doing those yet, but those are in the making. I'm just working on building up my supply so that I can do those videos and make them as informational as possible for you guys. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and that is it. I will see you guys next time.